Thank you. All right, so I thought I might start off by giving you a bit of context for where I come from, because being an international school, it's likely to be different to where you're working. So Dulwich College, it's quite an impressive looking building, impressive looking school, quite new. We're into our 5th year, so we've gradually been growing. This is my 3rd year at the school. So it's part of a group of a family of 8 international schools and 2 international high schools and 1 sister school in Asia. It was the original Dulwich College was founded by Adolescents back in 1619. So this year actually marks our 400-year anniversary as a group of schools. Our school, Dulwich, Singapore, we've got over 2,000 students, aged from 2 to 18 years, from 50 different countries, and we're actually the largest school in the group of Dulwich schools. We opened in August 2014 with students from the Ducks, which is our 2-year-olds to year 2, to year 8 at that point. We only had 2 libraries then, and our senior library opened in 2016. So I'm the first librarian in that library. So I was able to enjoy a lifelong desire to start a library. So it's been fabulous. So here's a quick look at our 3 libraries. The first one at the top is our Ducks library for children aged 2 to 7 years. And the bottom one there is our junior library, year 3 to 6. And this one here is mine, the year 7 through to 13. At this stage, we only go to year 12 because we've gradually been growing. We'll have our final or our full complement next year when our year 12s become year 13s. So the top picture is a quick snap of the downstairs where I keep my fiction collection, and the bottom picture is the non-fiction collection upstairs. So that's just to give a bit of context to where we're coming from as a school library. Myself personally, I've been an educator for over 30 years, and a good part of that as a teacher librarian, working initially and for the longest period of time in Australia. My first position as a international school teacher librarian was in Abu Dhabi, where I had 4.5 years before coming to Singapore. So let's start off by thinking about, why at the beginning we considered, reading as something that everybody accepts as something that really we need to be doing. It's something that's very important. But what about, why non-fiction? Where does that fit into the context? And a lot of the research just says it doesn't matter what kids are reading, just as long as they're reading. But I thought this quote here from the ACT study that was done in 2006, stating that the clear differentiator in reading between students who are college ready and students who are not is the ability to comprehend complex text. So I think when we're really getting up into the senior school years, we, obviously we that's when we see kids starting to drop off with their reading. And, it's our job, I think, in the senior school to make sure all the fabulous work that's been done in the lower levels of schooling is continued, and we keep our students reading. But the idea of moving them on and reading the non-fiction books as well, using that non-fiction collection and making sure that is the type of collection that students are going to want to come and borrow from. So in terms of doing that at Dulwich, when I was asked to do this talk, I thought, oh yes, non-fiction collection development, I do that all the time. Yep, that'll be fine. I'll have no trouble talking about that. But then when I actually sort of came down to actually deconstruct the idea and think, okay, well, what do I do? And so what I realised then was what we do at Dulwich is there's 2 awards here in Singapore that really kind of focus our collection development, or where we start from. And one of them is the Red Dot Award. the Red Dot Book Award, and so that's a student choice award that's annually organised by the International Schools Library Network in Singapore. So there's a very, very strong network of school librarians who get together, and at the moment we're shortlisting for next year, reading ferociously and coming together regularly and choosing books. And while for the most part the books are fiction books, we are looking at the wider reading aspect of the award, and we always ensure that there are good non-fiction books in that award too. So certainly as I'm looking I mostly look at the mature readers' books. I'm looking at what's good in non-fiction that is a real standout and can be part of this award. The other thing that we do in Dulwich College International is our own internal award that we call the Dulwich International Information Book Award, where the group of librarians from across all the different colleges, we digitally get together and we look at non-fiction books that can be part of our award. So we want to highlight good quality non-fiction books both in English and Mandarin, and promote them across the colleges in the Dux Junior and Senior School. And we very soon will start to shortlist for that, so that we are ready to look at those and focus on those non-fiction books in November, just to tie in with Non-Fiction November. So the poster at the side there are the ones that ended up on the shortlist for last year, and it does give us a whole month then to really focus on non-fiction books, a really good reason to get the whole school looking at non-fiction books, and the kids really excited about reading books in that area. The other thing that we've started to look at too, as we're choosing non-fiction books, particularly for this award, is this idea of the non-fiction family tree. And I'm finding, particularly in the senior library, we're looking now at books that kids are really going to want to pick up and read and enjoy and dip in and out of. We talk to kids about the fact that we don't expect that they're going to read them from cover to cover the way they would a fiction book. That it's fine to look at the table of contents, look at the index at the back, just look through the books in terms of what's interesting for them. And so we found this idea of the non-fiction family tree put forward by Melissa Stewart. And I'm assuming that this PowerPoint will be accessible to you all later. So I've put lots of links and so forth in it. I've tried to sort of pack as much information as I can so that you can follow up on things. But we look at dividing our books up into these different categories, and it's been a really interesting way for us to consider non-fiction books in our collection. And we talk to the kids about how books fit into those different categories, so that when the students come from the junior school up to me, they have an understanding of how a non-fiction book might differ and the sorts of things that they like to read. So I think also in libraries, a really important thing is we always need to come back to our policy, our library policy. So those statements there, which I won't read through to you, are the ones in our DCI, our Dulwich College International. So this policy goes across all of the libraries in Dulwich. That's the focus that we have for our collection development, both fiction and non-fiction. The other thing that I do is really work closely with the heads of departments and liaise with them in terms of what they're going to need to support the work that they're doing in their different subject areas. So, they'll make suggestions about what they want. They'll help me identify gaps in the collection so that I know, where we need to build up and make sure that we've got the resources that the kids need for the work and for their interest. I also like the kids' input as well. So there is a document that they can link to from, we use Firefly as our platform of communicating between the students and the parents. So they can put suggestions into Firefly, but I find that having these little bins on the front desk in my library, both upstairs and downstairs, where they can just grab a little piece of paper and write down what they want. Most of it is fiction, but they're able to make suggestions about what they want. So we go through that bin every now and then, and we add it to our list of books that we're the order that we're developing at the time. When I first started as a librarian, I used lots of review magazines because there wasn't an online environment when I first started. So I was heavily dependent on review magazines because obviously you can't read everything. These days I only get one. This is the School Librarian, which is a British-based one. Our school, does have a very strong British influence. So that's the one that we subscribe to, and it has, a section of reviews that we all use and refer to when we're buying. But as in the past, I used a lot of review magazines, but I sort of can't give up that habit, so we've still got that one. The other thing that I really do a lot of these days is the online lists. So I've developed a collection of lists, and these ones are particularly oriented to non-fiction books. And as I'm choosing books for the library and looking for books that I can take along to the Red Dot meetings and put forward on our long list for the Information Book Award, within the Dulwich group, these are the lists I use. So I've put a link to all of them. So if you may find them useful, there's quite a long list here. And, it's sort of been something that I've been building up for a while. I'll continue to add to. I might take some of them out, but there's, that's really where I sit down and start to look and start to see those books that are coming up on all of the various lists. And the ones that really are regularly appearing are the ones that I tend to look at then as our shortlisted books. But, it's a good way of developing a good quality collection. The other thing I'm really noticing of late is the rise of the graphic non-fiction book. That picture there at the bottom is actually a picture of my my graphic non-fiction novel area, which I inherited a small collection and found the kids were really loving them, so I built that up. And initially, I included the non-fiction books in with the fiction books. But now I'm finding the great interest in kids really wanting them for information as well. So I'm taking all of the non-fiction ones out and I'm putting them back into the non-fiction collection upstairs so that kids can use those as information books. The English teachers particularly love the editions of Shakespeare that are graphic novels. And so I'm looking at, and obviously in publishing, that's an area that's really fast growing. And the kids love them. I personally hate them. I don't like reading graphic novels, but, obviously I have to develop for the clientele that I've got. So, I find that these books are really, really popular with the boys, but the girls also love reading them. They're very good for the ESL students. They're teaching that visual literacy and sequencing, which is really important. And, the way they convey facts in full colour for the kids, I think they're probably, sort of like the screens that they're used to looking at, I suppose. And, they obviously get a lot from them. And they really are much more complex than they're given credit for. I have to say that that's something I've discovered as I've spent more time, forcing myself to read them. As I said before, our focus is a lot on when we're wanting the information for kids' research and so forth, we're looking more at our online resources and our databases. At this stage, I only have Follett and EBSCO Host and JSTOR because we've got a very small year 11 and 12, and huge numbers coming up through the school. So in time, those huge numbers will, come into our older classes. But at this stage, 2 databases is really enough for us, but I intend to increase that as time goes on. So yeah, the online resources will become more important as our kids, get older and we have more of them. And the focus will be more on our non-fiction books being those interesting books for them to borrow and read. I work really closely with the English staff as well, and they have a non-fiction element in their curriculum, so that they every so often they want me working with the kids and reminding them about the joys of reading non-fiction books. And we do that, and we find that they re-spark an interest, and that pushes things along. Just something that when I was looking at or thinking about non-fiction collection development, I realised too that it's also important to make sure that the kids can find what they're looking for. So I put a link to at this stage. This is free signage that I'm using that Katie J put together. So I thought I'd put a link to that, and sort of show you something that you can use that helps the kids find what they're looking for. So on that website, you've got the Dewey Decimal poster, and also signs for the different sections. And she's also put together some labels that fit into those magazine holders, which really helps our kids move through the collection and find things when they're wandering around themselves. I also think, when I look at my library, and when particularly if I go to Kinnicunia of a weekend and I see people wandering, I mean the place is just bulging with people. So I sort of sit there and I look and I think, okay, what are they doing? How are they getting people interested in books? And so a lot of what I try and do is to emulate what's happening in bookshops. And I've been really lucky with my new library in that they have put a lot of my wall space, and they've made it into that front-facing shelving. And I know that putting my books out like that, we're constantly having to replace them. At the moment, those shelves at the beginning or sort of partway into the year, we had 2 books on every one, but we've quite often they've only got 1 now, and we've got spaces and we're filling it up. So if you're designing a library, or if you've got the ability to put your books out on show like that, you certainly will make sure that those books that you've bought will be utilised much more readily. I also think too, with your collection development, it's not just buying the books, it's also keeping them nice and fresh. So that the method that we tend to keep in mind, although I have to say I'm only into my 3rd year, so there hasn't been a lot of weeding happening, but I'm starting now to realise it's something that we need to focus on. But it should really be a continuous thing as you find things that aren't fitting with your collection. It needs to be ongoing, and you need to keep it fresh. I think particularly for teenagers, if it's not, they're going to walk away from it. So that's the method that we tend to look at. So that's really all I wanted to say today. Any questions or areas of concern for you?